Hi, everybody. It is a beautiful day here in East Tennessee, and we're here for some academic literature regarding the 17th century witch burnings. I'm just so stoked. I know I am. I have heard tell that we're going to name some names here coming up soon. So apologies for barking dogs and whatever. You know how neighborhoods are. I'm going to be muted while she's talking anyway, because we're waiting on my good friend Kitty Cat, who is going to be coming and reading, excuse me, this just amazing piece of literature for us once again this week, because she's doing all the heavy lifting lately, helping me keep the channel going and just educating those who are interested in such things. History doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. I heard that in a video this morning. I know she didn't say that. I know I've heard that before. I don't know who it was that said that, but it is a wise thing, I suppose, because with this book that we've been reading, one cannot help, I think, but draw parallels, between these centuries. And, the girl I was watching this morning made the interesting point that I think culture really does evolve more quickly now than it has in the past. So these patterns took centuries to play out in, the Middle Ages and early modern era, and now it's taken decades, I suppose, and it's just fascinating. What up, good girl? You've missed the last few, so you'll have to catch up eventually. That's okay. It's Did you hear what I was saying a minute ago? We're basically it is the cultural, the history build up to how it was that they managed to get away with burning a bunch of women, hanging them, whatever, executing them, trying them for not witchcraft. I hate to call that crap witchcraft. Like I like to dabble in the occult every so often, and every time I run into something that treats anything from the trial confessions as like actual occultism, I'm like, yeah, and I'm out. Thank you. Smoke them if you got them. You know what? I quit 3 weeks ago tomorrow, and I didn't want to make a big thing of it, but thank you for the $10 that will go in my gas tank or something. How have you been? Did you get your living situation sorted finally? You haven't said it. I haven't seen you for a while. You've been busy, I guess. I know. Good. Another big truck. Oh no, that one lives across the street from me. Never mind. And I wish I could split. Oh, congratulations! Thank you, thank you. It was. Do you want to hear the story about what it was that finally tore it for me? What was the final straw? When I just like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. You want to hear the story of how I quit smoking? Everybody loves those stories, right? Ooh, Kitty's here. Eee. I mean, I'll tell it anyway. But... Hey, how are you?
I'm still waking up.
That's okay.
I had a long day yesterday.
Was it okay? Is everything okay?
Oh yeah, no, it was okay. Just when life, there's lots of just little things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, summer's coming up. I'm gonna have to carve out these blocks of time with a hatchet. You know?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, that works. Yeah, because I have my kid, right? So I
Yeah.
have to keep him amused, or he's just going to be at the computer all the time, and I don't want
Right,
that.
right, right. You have to keep them engaged, or they drift away. Hey, Alfalfa, how you doing, honey?
Hello.
And Geek Girl's here today. She says she's missed a couple, but
That's all good.
yeah. And I was catching her up a little bit. It's just like incidental, the cultural and economic and historical uh, environment and what do I want to say? Elements? What do I want to say? Influences leading up to how exactly it is they got away with executing all those women like that.
Yeah, and we're getting to that starting today at the last sub section of the chapter when we start to get into the witches part, because it goes into, because of what we've learned so far throughout the history. Right now our sub chapters will be going into the starting of the population and stuff like that, and the control. So, and that's leading obviously to women and their reproduction. So
Still up in the air
that's
at
what
the
we'll be
moment.
doing
I'm sorry to
today.
hear that. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh boy. No, and I was talking to her about something. She says she's still up in the air housing wise and hoping to be in a better climate before next winter. Is that you did you mean for that to be a pun? Because yeah, absolutely. Good luck.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, at least you're not in Canada. We have the worst, literally, the worst housing um, margin in the world of increase in the whole world. You look at the data, and
Yeah.
if you make it out of if you make that data into a graph, it shoots up like completely vertical.
There
Yeah,
were, yeah. I was looking at some houses in my neighborhood because I'm nosy and you can look up like the cost history and like how much they're worth and whatever. As
yeah,
I was walking around the neighborhood yesterday and the graph looked like this. Doo 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 doo. I'm like,
yeah,
what the shit?
yeah.
Some of the
And
houses around here are worth two hundred
Canada's
and fifty
literally,
thousand dollars now. They only
yeah,
have one toilet, but you'll pay $250,000 for it. Holy shit.
$50,000. What?
$250,000 for a house with one toilet.
Oh, that's nothing here.
Oh,
That's
oh,
nothing
oh.
here.
They were
Mine,
okay, okay. 10 years
mine.
ago, they were in the double digits. They were like
No,
$50,000
I know.
10
Same
years
here. That's
ago.
what I'm saying. Canada's even worse. This house that I'm in right now is a small
Uh-huh,
little rancher. It's
uh-huh.
worth about 750,000. My mom got this back in the 80s for like what 34,000,
Uh-huh,
something
uh-huh,
like that, 28,000, something around that sort of area. And yeah, and it's already worth almost $1 million, and it's a small house.
uh-huh.
It's like that's what I'm saying. Canada's literally, I did not know this until yesterday, worst in the whole world when it comes to the spike. Yeah.
At least you're not looking right now, I suppose. Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
that like this is why I moved back into my mom's place. One, she needed,
Right.
because I was a renter though. My mom, she needed help, right? Because she's getting older and all in age. So we live in the basement suite, but it's like I have to share a bathroom or
Mm,
a bath, right? Because I have a toilet but nothing with it, right? And a
mm.
kitchen. Because
Yeah.
there's only one kitchen. It's a small
Right.
place, but there's like it's almost impossible to get to own house. And they're all the reason why it spikes so bad is that foreign companies have been buying up the housing market,
Mm.
driving
Yeah,
up the
like
housing
investment firms and
costs,
stuff.
and then like yeah, and then nobody's living there. Everything's vacant. All these houses and stuff vacant because nobody can afford it, and they're just buying it up. They're causing a bubble. And so the only people that are starting to like actually come in and be able to afford it are like usually foreigners who are thinking, oh, this is like a second home. So they're like double, um, yeah, or got two visas, one for like somewhere else, and this is like the summer vacay or something. Yeah,
Oh, how the other half live. Oh, holy shit.
yeah, that's probably the worst thing that's going on. And the funny thing is, we just had an election, and
Mm-hmm.
every single politician that was like that had asked the question about the housing completely ignored this fact that like is being bought up by outside, foreign uh, interests. And it's
That's
like, well,
fun.
none of you, I can't vote for any single one of you. Y'all are suck. You all don't know what you're talking about because you do know what you're talking about. You're avoiding it. Because I know that you're all stupid.
Right. And why would they be avoiding it? Blah, 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 blah.
Well, we know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, line their fucking pockets.
Yep.
Anyways, that's my rant of the day.
Really, really, I'm not going to hold you to that. It's okay. That's why we're here.
But what's funny is that in terms of the elections, because the Liberals won,
Hmm.
and what's funny is they were set to lose. Like they were like, because Justin Trudeau literally had to like go early with his fucking tail
Right.
between his legs, like in shame. The Liberals were down to nothing. Nobody liked the Liberals. And then
See, I
Trump
thought
came
maybe
into
I misunderstood that because I thought that
no.
I'm a little
You know
confused
what
about that.
happened? Do you know what happened? Trump took
Huh.
office, and then we saw what a conservative government would have,
Okay.
and it switched like fucking gangbusters.
That's funny.
Like really switched on a dime.
Wow. Nope. That's pretty
And
awesome,
so much so
actually.
that nobody voted for the NDP, so now they're getting kicked out. So now we only have a two-party system, basically.
Wow. Like if only Germany had done that. Looking at Italy.
But the
Am I
thing is,
right? Oh my God.
Mark Carney, he and Trump have passed history as
Uh,
comrades together. So this is
uh.
what I'm saying. It doesn't really matter.
No,
Not
yeah.
really. He's never been in politics before, and he's comes from the central bank
Oh, nice. So
of here
they,
and of England.
they rigged the leftward swing anyway.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Okay. But so speaking of England, like, does that ruling affect you guys? That's going to be fun if it does.
What do you mean?
Oh, their Supreme Court ruled the other day
No,
that
we have our own
no.
Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of figured the Commonwealth is a lot looser than that. But
Yeah.
like,
Oh, I wish.
still,
I really wish. Like that would have been.
yeah,
That would have been making my day. I would be coming on here instead of ranting. I'd be celebrating.
yeah, right. A
Like,
lot of them are. It makes me so angry though because they act like they're following our example, and it's like, no, 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 no. Y'all had like a
the
bipartisan
TRAs.
body, huh?
The TRAs are.
No, no. The British turfs are being like, yeah, because America knows what a woman is, and now so do we. And it's like, no,
I've never
that's
heard any one of
that's.
them say that.
Oh, I've heard a couple of people say that, and I'm like, no, that's not what's going on here. You guys,
Yeah,
like, I feel like they don't understand sometimes the level of like, issue over
no,
here. You
that's weird.
know,
That's weird. I haven't heard a single feminist say that or turf or
uh,
whatever. But yeah, because that's weird. Because like
yeah,
you guys are still in the thick of it too. I mean, you're doing well, better than Canada. I'll tell you that.
right. When it comes to that, but it's like,
But when
at
it
what
comes to
cost?
Turf Island for a reason.
Yeah. And it's like what we got is at what cost? You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
just
yeah, really. Because yeah, you got it, Trump.
Donald Trump knows what a woman is. He wants to grab her by the pussy. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
that's right. Exactly.
That's the wrong motivation.
Like wrong motivation, right? Oh,
Hey,
I laugh
Red.
because it's so scary,
You're right. No, you laugh or cry. It's fine.
right?
It's fine.
This is
Yeah.
why gallows humor is best humor because without it, I don't know where I'd be. Gone insane by this point, I think. You gotta
Oh,
have to just laugh at the ridiculousness of it all, really. What else are you gonna
yeah.
do?
Well, and I think having some quirks is just fundamental to human existence. So I don't feel too
Yeah.
bad.
Well, it's a stress reliever, right? You need to laugh at situations, or because it's a way to deal with
Mhm.
it, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you just gotta fucking make fun of it all.
Yeah. What else are you gonna do? I guess.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing
Mm.
much you can do too much at this point, at least individually speaking. Sorry, I'm just grabbing some gum.
Mm.
Eric, I'm back. I'm back. I'm still half asleep.
We're not. No, it's fine. You're fine.
It's funny. I when you said, "Are we still on for today?" and you emailed me,
Mhm.
I got up, but I was still half asleep, and I wrote back, "Yeah, we are right." But then I fell back to sleep, right? Because I was getting up at 8. I had an alarm set for 8, and like I had a dream that I don't know that like I linked somewhere else, and we couldn't like get each other like hold of each other through the email, and like I woke up going like, "Oh, what's going on? What's going
Oh
on?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh wait, no, that was that did that happen or was that a dream?" Like when you have
no.
asleep, they're
Oh
like,
my
"No, that didn't
god.
happen." Fuck. Okay, we're okay.
Stress dreams are the worst.
Right.
Oh my god. Hey, we have a very interesting comment just come through. It
Hmm.
appears to be in Arabic. Can you see that?
Um.
Or is that
Yeah,
only
I'm
I
just
can see
reading.
that?
How are you, Geek Girl and Alfalfa? Red Blaren?
No,
No,
right after the bit about paying women to sleep with them.
no, I don't see any of that.
Okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and show it so everybody can see that because weird.
Well, I mean, that's obviously a bot.
Mm. Oh, I see it now. Yeah, that's weird, right?
And just take them out.
Well,
They're a bot. They're not even a
useless
person.
bot is useless because I can't read Arabic. So.
I have a feeling that this is just a way to sow division within America. It's probably an American bot, actually.
Well,
Right?
I'll just ignore it like I do the rest of them. You're right. I just keep forgetting that, like, we're surrounded by robots.
Yeah, we are.
No, and it's fine because and that's what I was going to ask you about. I was watching something earlier about history rhyming with itself, essentially, and like she made the point that culture is evolving faster, so these patterns are playing out quicker, and like be in that relating that to what we've been talking about. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I don't think culture is evolving faster. I think technology is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very dangerous because we don't live in my opinion, don't live in a democratic society anyways. Like represent the dem- representation that they're representing are not the people. It's like it's power. It's people with money, right? So we don't even live in a democracy. So it's very dangerous, the technology and that kind of boom, because like
Mm-hmm.
there's no guardrails. Like there's nothing like for it to just become absolutely fascistic in its practice, right? Um, culturally speaking, I don't think culture is keeping up with it. That's the problem, right? And so now we're
Mm-hmm.
so propagandized to a point we're isolated. We don't like
Mm-hmm.
communicate in face. We don't know how to grow our own food. We don't know how to be self-sufficient. We
Mm-hmm.
are totally and utterly reliant on the people that hate us, basically, because they don't see us as people or as human beings. And they are the ones that shape culture.
Right.
Because they are the ones that are in politics and are the ones that control industry. So everything about our culture is like constructed and crafted by people who
Mm-hmm.
don't see us as equals.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you'll notice too a lot. Like I know we spoke about this before about the similarities between back then
Mm-hmm.
and now. You'll
Oh yeah.
notice a lot of another. You'll see it's another a lot of the same thing that's going on now is just happened at that point of time and how
Right.
it accumulated to a point where the witch burnings, which is
But
scary.
still, right. Yeah, no, and that is the idea that's been haunting my nightmares for the last couple of months while we've been doing this. But like what I'm getting at, I guess, is these patterns back then, it sounds played out over the course of like centuries, and now we're looking at decades. Why do you think that is?
I don't think that is. I think that it slowly
Okay.
plays out. We've been on a bad trajectory for a very long time, but it was slower and it does accelerate over time until it
Mm,
collapse. You'll notice that
okay.
too. If they didn't, if this, it's going to accelerate too as well. When we go through it, you'll see that sort of acceleration between the 16th and 17th centuries when it went boom, full on, like to the whole witch burnings, right? It accumulated to a point where it does accelerate as well. But instead of
Okay.
collapsing, they expanded. Problem with today is we've already expanded everywhere. And so I really have to wonder if this isn't sort of almost like what Trump is doing isn't trying to accelerate the process even more and quickly pull out with all the money for him and his rich buddies and then close himself off. Because now that all of this is going on, there's going to be no tourism for America. Food supplies, because of the tariffs, there's going to be nothing on the shelves. Everyone's going to be in poverty and they're going to be taking all your money from Social Security. And they're going to give it to their friends, to
Mm-hmm.
the wealthy friends, and there's going to be no food. There's going to be no money, and then they're going to be just dip because they know that it's not what they're doing is unsustainable. Capitalism is never sustainable. So I I do have a feeling that they're just using and the AI too. We have a lot of technology where it's going to help them create a police state to try to control the chaos. That's what
Mm.
I know. Put a tinfoil hat on me, but that's what it seems like to me that's happening.
Oh, whatever. That doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. But it sounds crazy for people who don't really know their own history or know much about socio-political,
Right, or like the
Yeah.
present,
Hmm?
or they don't know anything about the present
Well, their own
either. I
history
guess.
that's leading up to this, because it sounds weird until you know what's like the inception of fucking America, for one, how that went down, how there's been struggle, how there's always been like it's never been like democratic, right? Lots of it sounds weird to people because they've lived in a sort of a bubble where every sort of oppression, all that is most of our class is mostly exported to the third world. So they don't know how
Mhm.
harsh and how terrorizing their government can be. They really don't, because they don't see
Right.
it. So I think
It's
that
like
it's so
being the
it sounds
golden
ridiculous
child in
coming
a.
from someone who like doesn't pay attention to any of that shit.
No, it reminds me of like being a golden child in like a narcissistic family dynamic, where you never see that side of them until one day maybe you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yikes.
For terrorism. Just
Red's just
reported for
being a rabble
terrorism? What?
rouser.
I'm
Do I
reading
want
the
anything from
comments.
Sonic? No, I don't want anything from Sonic. Thank you, honey.
Sonic what?
Red's Sonic is a restaurant.
Oh, someone's talking to you.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I didn't say
He's
anything
just
about
being
Sonic.
he's just being a rabble rouser.
No, I was just reading Red Blaren.
Great, that's who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get that far yet.
As far as reporting that comment, he's just being a rabble rouser. Alfalfa
Oh,
says it could be Persian. I admit to not being able to tell the difference between if they use that same script, then I would not know that.
isn't there a hedgehog?
Uh-uh.
Red Blaren? That's what I was thinking, because we don't have Sonic
Right?
here.
Yeah. No. Right? Yeah. No. It's a fast food restaurant.
Yeah. I do know that. It's funny because I don't. It's not the first thing that comes to mind because we don't have Sonic
Uh-huh.
here.
Uh-huh.
First thing comes to mind is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah. No. And I just took a picture of my son in a Sonic the Hedgehog costume yesterday. So.
No funny. Mm.
Uh,
All right. So, do you mind talking to the audience for a second? I just have to quickly use the bathroom.
no. Yeah. Go for it. Get
I'll be
ready. Do
right
what you
back,
got
and
to
then we
do.
can start. Then we can begin.
Yeah. Okay. It is not just a restaurant. Oh. I mean, you have to drive up and sit in your car and reach out the window to push the button to order things. So, is that what you mean? Uh, is it a lifestyle? Sonic. Yeah, no, not Sonic. Sonic. It's a restaurant. It's not the hedgehog. I don't think it's related to the hedgehog. My son asked me which came first, and I'm pretty sure it was the hedgehog. Um, it seems like a strange choice to name for either of them to me, but what do I know? It is a drink experience. Oh, okay. Well, it's an experience that I'm going to decline to engage with today, yet again. I don't need that junk. I'm doing well. Doggone it. um. Yeah. So it's a beautiful day. Um. I don't know. I cut all that junk. Strawberry shortcake snowball slush. Like, I'm sure it's delicious, but wow, what an. I mean, come on. How can you not want to taste that? I don't. Okay. It would probably just make me sick now, right? Because I have stuck with this diet long enough that white bread makes me ill. So I can only imagine what something with that much sugar in it would do to my stomach. And that's just how it is, man. I don't know what to say. Um, and I'm not sad to have, shaken off that particular monkey. I I already feel better. I don't know if I look any better, but I already feel better. So I'm going on 4 months. Now that I've mentioned it, I might as well say um, it'll be 4 months on the Friday. Yeah. So because I don't talk about my personal health and whatever on here like a whole lot, but it's my current obsession, I guess you could say, besides my novel, because I don't want to be sick and die.
What? I just got in the interesting part of the conversation. You don't want to be sick and die?
I'm sorry. I was talking about the diet I've been doing since the beginning of the year because I came
Oh,
up
okay.
hyperglycemic. I came up
Oh, yeah, yeah,
borderline
yeah.
diabetic.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't talk about that a whole lot. But he was asking me if I want a strawberry shortcake snowball slush. And I was like, you know what? I've been on this diet long enough that white bread makes me sick. So, probably not.
I would. You got something for me?
No, I mean they do have a lot of decadent stuff at that place, but legitimately, I had a roll like a few weeks ago, and it made me sick. And like
Oh,
pasta makes
yeah.
me sick, and like just awful gas. And like I can only imagine what something with that much sugar in it would do to my stomach now. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, considering like the stuff that's in things in our food and stuff like that, yeah. If you change your diet and eat healthy, you can really tell the difference if you start to like eat something that's got
hmm
processing and sugar,
great.
the amount of sugar. Holy.
And apparently, 2.5, 3 months is long enough. So, and now I'm at almost 4, and it's like, no, I'm good. I don't really miss that particular demon. Thank you. It's good.
Ugh, you know what okay, confession time. I'm addicted to Coca-Cola. I can,
Oh,
especially in the summer on hot days when you're working outside and this like the fizzy, but the sugar and just the stomach acid, your stomach lining, like
it
it's.
takes
I
the
know
tarnish
it's so
off of
horrible. And
pennies.
it's just too good, and I'm like, I hate cola. It's such a shit company that does really
Yeah.
shitty things, but I love it. I
Oh, that's
hate it.
terrible.
Right?
We all have something though, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I try to be good. I try to
Yeah, yeah.
like be conscientious about things like that in the
hmm
companies that I work with, and any way I could get around using them, I would. But it's hard when it comes to the cola for me, anyways.
Well, yeah, and they have their particular formulation that doesn't taste quite the same as any of the rest of them, right? So,
Right. My
have
theory is they're still using cocaine.
you ever had cocaine?
No, but they used to use it. They used to put it in their cola.
I
Eh?
know, I know, but
Yeah, that was
I've
my whole
had
point. I was trying to be funny,
no, I know, but like
and I'm not going to answer that question.
I was just saying it must be microdosing or something because it'll
No,
give
it
you a
probably
zip,
isn't. It's
but
probably just caffeine, lots of caffeine and
yeah,
sugar, which is addictive anyways.
yeah,
But like, I
yeah.
feel like a fucking crackhead when I'm drinking, when I'm craving it, because I'm just like, it's so good.
Is this something that goes back to when you were young?
Yeah, I used to drink a lot of it
hmm
when I was younger.
Yeah, so then it's got its hooks in you from so far back, and that makes it extra hard.
Yeah.
hmm
Just for the record, I'm not on cocaine right now.
Oh no, 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 me
It's
neither.
a joke.
Yeah,
Just because like I sometimes forget we're on air. Like we're
yeah,
live.
true, true, true. And anything we say can and will be used against us in the court of popular
Right.
opinion. Ah, well,
All right. Just getting myself and my mic set up here.
just play it off the way overconfident dudes do. Just be like, I was joking.
Yeah.
Stop taking this shit so seriously. It's just a joke.
Never a joke. I don't believe that. It's just gaslighting.
No, I know, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to use.
They use their gaslighting against them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you were joking. You know what I'm
I was.
saying? Like,
Maybe
people get. I've
in my
seen. I
younger
think
years,
that
back in my
sometimes
mid
though.
20s or early 20s, I dabbled. But
Right? Yeah,
trust
but
me
that
when
was
I
so
say
long
that was
ago.
so long ago that I can barely
Yeah.
remember. It's
Yeah, that
probably
was
a good thing that I
almost a
can barely
different
remember,
century.
right? Like,
Almost a different century. It was so long ago.
yo, it's yeah. Mm,
Yes.
yeah,
Which one of us is older? I forget.
I don't know.
Is
I don't.
it
How old are you?
41?
Oh, you're older than me
Okay.
by like 2,
Okay.
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we would have gone to middle school together. It's close enough for me.
yeah. There you go. Maybe 1.5. Let's just put 1.5. Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
maybe less than that.
Do you guys have middle school? It's only 3 years.
No, well, depending on where you go in Canada, Ontario, I
Okay.
think has middle school. We don't in
Okay.
BC. We
Okay.
just have high school and elementary school.
Okay. Well, it's this 3 year chunk in the middle. So, like, if you're tight enough in age that you'd have gone to that together, then
Yeah,
we're the same age. It's fine.
essentially we are.
Yeah.
Especially like when you get older, you kind of yeah.
The older you get, the less that gap means.
Hmm?
The older you get, the less that gap actually means.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, like once you pass, I think 35 is particular. Then it
Yeah.
just doesn't matter.
Right. No, and my husband and I, we met when I was 15 and he was 18, and that made a big difference then.
Yeah, well, that's because
And
you're like
now,
maturing, right? Like,
right.
so
And now we're
it's
both
a
in our early
faster
40s, and it
process.
does not matter at all, like,
Yeah. Well, it's only three
basically.
years, but still, like it's the maturation process is really quick.
Hmm.
Like it's only a couple years, but then you slow down after you hit the peak. Yeah,
Yeah. I guess what we're saying is we peaked some time ago, right? That's what we're saying.
in many ways.
But not in always, you
Yeah,
know?
I was just thinking of peak trans, but that's just my thing.
Oh, that. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Definitely. And I'm starting to think the Western world is finally following suit. Like, seriously. I've been thinking that for a while, but
yeah.
that
It's
court ruling
we've gone
really
to a
helped.
point that it's so bloody because nobody really was going along with it. Like, or, you know what I mean? They were just going along with it because they didn't care. But now it's encroaching on people's lives enough that they care because it affects them. That was the issue. That was mostly the issue, was getting people to like to care.
Hmm.
And
And
unfortunately,
the,
people usually don't have any sort of moral standing until it affects only them because yeah, instead of just the community, right? Which is a little sad to think, but it's the truth.
well, or, affect someone close to them, which is unfortunately just how, like, empathy
Yeah,
tends to work. Your empathy extends to people and
yeah. But it's harder though when people are so hyper individualized, right? For this,
yes.
because yeah, you don't have a bigger expansion of a circle of your sort of group, your
Hmm.
community kind of a thing.
You
So,
don't know as many people, like, literally.
well, yeah, exactly, because you're individualized. But oh, birdies. So let's see here. Anytime you're ready, by the way.
Okay, Geek Girl said she was switching to TV streaming. She's going to be right back, so maybe we should wait for that.
Okay, we'll wait for Geek Girl. No problem.
Okay. And Red Laren says if it wasn't for Gaslight, we'd be stuck in the dark. Ironically, that sounds shady to me.
Shady. Mm,
Excuses, excuses.
mm. And I keep forgetting to send you thumbnails. I will try to do that later when we're off.
Okay.
Give them all to you. I keep forgetting. I'm very sorry.
Oh, that's
I'm gonna.
fine.
Oh, by the way, we had um we had a
Hang
judgment get
on.
passed.
Hang on. I can't hear you. Hang on. God damn, that thing is loud. I'm so
um,
sorry.
no, that's okay. We had a ruling come down for the sentencing of that guy that
Oh,
punched.
yeah.
Yeah. So he was found guilty. So that's good. Which I like he he tried in court to say that he did it out of fear and that it was his ADHD. And yet
ADHD
careless.
makes people violent now? Oh no.
I know. And this guy's
That's a whole lot of stigma we
6'4".
don't
He
need,
was
guys.
in
Come
like
on.
army gear and like steel-toed boots with a fucking metal rod pole as his stick for his sign. He came there for a fight. Like,
Right, yeah. You were saying, oh my god, and then he tried to make himself the victim. Of
yeah,
course.
of course. And he even did it afterwards when to try to say that, you know, he suffered when he was found guilty before the sentencing aspect. His lawyer, I guess, tried to say that we were harassing him at the courthouse. He had to get like police as security to walk him to the car. No, he didn't. Dude, this lies, just lies. It's so bad. And his lawyer showed up. This is the best part, in a fucking Cybertruck.
Wow.
Like,
What is the stream for? We got somebody asking what the stream is
so
for.
bad.
Hey. You want to sleep this time? We got somebody asking what the stream is for.
Hmm?
So he lost? Is he going to be sentenced soon?
He's already been sentenced.
Okay.
Unfortunately, because Canada's really lax on violence, like violence offenders and all that. But in every sort of aspect, it's kind of lenient with the law usually. So he's only got probation and for no jail time, which
For
we
punching
figured
a woman
probably
in the
would happen.
face.
But we wanted to have him have a criminal record of this on his record. But if he so he's got 12 months or 18 months, I forget which one, of probation where he has to go to anger management. He has to like go to the court. He's got to do. He does have community service, all that. If he needs to not get into trouble with the law at all, period. Because if he does, then he's going to get sentenced and sent to jail and have a criminal record on his record. Yeah, get a criminal record for that. So we're just hoping that he fucks up somehow a little bit, just so that like he can get like just a little messed up, just to have. It's not even the jail time as much as we want a record, because that will make it easier in case he shows up somewhere else after the probation period ends.
Yeah.
And like he does
Well,
this
it
again.
sounds like they give him
Because
plenty
if it's
of
not on
hurdles
his
to trip
record,
over.
then it's going to seem like it's not that big, you know. But if he has a record and then they see that it's happened, you know what I mean? Previously,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what we were going for, and yeah, unfortunately, that's Canada.
Wow. Yeah, so I'm not in Canada, but she is, and you're stuck in Ohio. What part of Ohio? This stream is, we are reading a book called Caliban and the Witch. Well, she's reading it, and I'm hosting. Which is an academic work delving into the influences, historical, cultural, economic, leading up to the cultural environment wherein they got away with executing a bunch of women for witchcraft back in the day.
And the reasoning and the fueling of feudalism into capitalism and that transitional period.
Which is actually super fascinating, and I can't believe I keep forgetting to mention that. But like, I was really enjoying that the last time, whenever that was, and the parallels between then and now are just
eerie,
riveting. Yeah,
to say the least.
it's the kind of thing that make you sit up and say, "Wait a minute."
Yeah, it's scarily eerie to present time sort of happenings, which again, like I said before, makes sense because capitalism is globalized, it's expanded as far as it can expand. And so the next transition is what people some refer to as like the fourth industrial revolution, which is just they have the AI, they have the technology, they don't need the workers anymore, for one thing. And they want to take all the money. And what do you do with broken tools when they're not necessary anymore? You throw them away, which is scary. And this is what I think the trans issue is a lot about, is the sort of trying to necessitate where they can not need women for reproduction anymore. They can like almost like in a factory make people. This is why they're sterilizing a lot of people. They're going to sell back to them their reproduction capabilities.
Well, then they can control how many people we get. If they don't, they can control the level of population.
Well, that's what, yeah, and that's necessary, right? Control the population to where you have the numbers that need it, and that's it. And you could that's why they're also the genome stuff and all that, and they're really investing in that because they would like to be able to control how different aspects of how people think, like, and like cognitively, like be able to maybe help, just work on the machines that keep AI fucking going. But
Yeah.
that's it, making them complacent. They're trying to figure that out. They're not close, but like they're still trying, they're investing a lot of money. And that's scary. If they don't like figure it out. Because they're still sterilizing people and they're still trying to find a way to like create humans in artificial wombs. And this is all just fucking dystopian as fuck. Like, this is not cool.
Right. And I could talk probably for hours about this attitude, this idea, this sort of almost like a zeitgeist or an ecosystem, this concept that, well, all that fascist stuff is either in the past or like fictional or satirical, like that, could never happen here, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So they just ignore it. It makes me so angry.
And that's the thing. Yeah, that's another thing that's the biggest uphill is if people ignore it, because a lot of the violence that the state actually uses is exported to other countries and other people.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't, and that, it creates this culture of like, you don't know because you don't see and you don't care to look because they're giving you scraps enough for you to feel comfortable.
Right. Which, like, again, I was watching something about, what is it, Skinner boxes?
Mm-hmm.
You know what that is?
From Skinner, as in the behaviorist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The random reinforcement thing, where if you stripped of all context, it becomes a dopamine machine, and you just sit there and like, blah, 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 zone out, and that's what that is.
Yeah.
So forget comfort. They'll just, you can just zone out. You don't need to be comfortable.
Well, that's comfortable enough if you're comparing it to what goes on in other countries.
Right? Yeah. No. I guess.
Are being forced to like live in deplorable conditions. You're poisoned because of the extraction, without any sort of like safety measures. Like, you know what I mean? Of these raw materials.
Well, yeah. It's comfortable compared to that, I suppose. Being strapped to the screen is more comfortable than
Exactly.
I don't know.
That's what I mean by that, right?
All that stuff is always horrifying me.
Yeah, it's horrifying to me too.
I can't sit still that long. I don't know. I have to get up, move around, and do something.
If you're not like brought up with a TV on 24/7 or a computer screen, right? Or even if you have, and then you move away from that and don't use that shit and try to come back, it's really hard to get back into.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's almost like it's bad for you.
It's not natural. We're not supposed to be just sitting watching a screen 24/7.
Right.
We're physical beings in the physical world. Like,
right.
We need to move.
Right. And I swear to God, I worked in geriatrics, and that was what really got me off it for good.
Yeah.
Was the just room after room after room of an old person just with the TV on.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, like nursing homes, and I'm just like, never. I would rather fall off a cliff at the age of 80. God, no. Not jump, mind you, but fall, because I'm hiking or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Anyways.
Is Geek Girl back?
I haven't seen her yet. You should share the peak moment that we were talking about yesterday. Which one was that? The guy who... Okay. I don't know if this is what you mean, but this is funny. I saw. You'll appreciate this, Kitty. Well, we had the elections here, right? And the conservatives won. So this trans woman person, this dude, moved to the UK because he was like fleeing, for...
Sorry.
No, yeah, you see where this is going.
Yeah, I do.
He's very upset now.
I bet.
And he can't work there legally, so he's not sure how he's going to afford to leave.
He couldn't come to Canada because there's no way he would have been able to afford a place to stay. Funny.
We were talking with the younger brother, and she was sharing her
Oh,
peak moment with us. Oh
isn't
my
it
god.
ironic? Don't you
You're
think?
right. I sure do. I think that's very funny. Um, okay, we were talking when you first started the channel. You two used to fight about the issues all the time. Yeah, she was saying that. She was sharing a moment with us. Like, not actually, we had the moment together, but she was telling us about it. Remind me what it was. I'm sorry, I'm going 8 different directions at the moment, actually.
So good. I'm curious.
Right, yeah. Um, I don't remember the conversation clearly enough to relate it right at the moment. Ugh. But yeah, she's come around on this a lot. Was it? Oh yeah, it was something about. Oh yeah. She saw somebody on social media. Was it somebody she knew talking about he was a trans woman having his period, and that just set her off.
These people.
Which, like, yeah, you don't have a uterus to slough its lining. What are you talking about? Uh, that's not possible. So yeah.
The idea that they have periods, but not even periods, but the idea that they go through PMS is the fact that they think because they're taking estrogen as a hormone that it's triggering some sort of thing in the brain that's making them think that they're having their periods. So it basically is the same because like it's affecting them just as much as it would women. Like when their estrogen makes them have periods.
Oh,
It's like that's
okay.
not how
So
it works.
so wait a minute. That could also be describing like psychosomatic stuff. You're taking a drug that's triggering something in your mind that's telling you a thing. So like maybe they're just describing their
But the drug is
experience in
it
a.
affects your mind as much as it affects your body to push it out, and that sensation is what pisses people off, right?
No,
Is that
yeah,
feeling of their body like so? It's everything. It's a holistic thing. It's not just
I know.
estrogen.
I'm not saying that right. They obviously misunderstand in a very shallow and misogynistic way, but I'm just saying, like, maybe they're accurately reporting their experience just in this delusional way, like,
Yeah, I can totally think that they're accurately reporting on their delusion, but
yeah.
like, but it's still a delusion,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
No,
it's like,
and that's what I say every time. Every time somebody's like, "Oh, these poor beleaguered people are so put upon by society." I'm like, "Yes, because they're mentally ill, and society treats mentally ill people like dog shit."
yeah, right? I know they're
What's your
mutilating
point?
the mentally ill because really,
Right? We know
you
this.
shouldn't be fucking allowed to cut them and their genitals. Really,
It's so unethical.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
unethical.
This person went surgery based on a belief that cannot possibly be true. Um, you should not take their money. That's not do no harm. That's terrible.
Yeah, they're just it's being exploited.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's totally unethical, and it's been said a million times.
yeah, and like I could focus on like how the unethical part for like some male fetishists getting to believe that in indulgent is a fetish, but I feel more sickened by the children who are getting really propagandized into and groomed into believing this shit. It's sad. It really is.
See, in our other one, our middle child, for lack of a better term, he's younger than she is, but we have 4, so he's not really a middle child. There is no middle child.
Yeah.
Um, he is 17, and there's much more. He's dated a couple of trans mask people. He's much more into that. And he left the room the other day when I said something about how trans adults need trans children to exist because otherwise they if
The
they want to say, "Oh,
ideology
I was
falls
always
apart.
this way," you have to find somebody else who's that way. You know what I'm saying?
No, exactly.
And just look at Blair White and Buck Angel. They make it their mission to go out and find and rescue the trans kids, and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
wow. The projection is so big with that.
Well,
I just can't
considering
even.
Bach has been a central part in actually transing children,
Mm,
he used to be all for it. He
mm-hmm.
gets mad at she gets mad at anyone who brings it up. But it's true. And she also has a porn industry where she's grooming young kids.
Oh no, I know.
It's so
That's
bad.
so disgusting.
Yeah.
And then some people turned against our daughter because she was being invasive, insensitive, and transphobic, and she was just saying the period cramps are a specific function of organs. They simply laughed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Misogynistic. To think anything else is misogynistic. It's just ridiculous.
And it's so interesting because that feeling of like being the victim of misogyny is so familiar, that like I feel like it's do fish know they're wet kind of thing. It can be,
Yeah.
where you just find yourself in that position over and over again and you don't realize that it's not fair
Yeah.
to have been put in that position.
And like for me, it really did. I know people like, oh, like I knew all like how misogynistic everything was. I didn't until this whole trans thing. I didn't realize how, like, I knew that misogyny existed. I didn't realize how misogynistic the like whole culture is for everyone to just go along with something like this and
Right.
not care
Same.
and just throw women under the bus. That's like part of it because like it's like really. So y'all, all of y'all think fucking like less of women then that you
Right.
can't even like that you can't even be bothered to like stand for truth
Right.
or see women as actual human beings that exist in a body. Like, come on, like that's what really kind of surprised me and shocked me.
No,
Really, I didn't
that's
expect
why I'm
that.
here, standing here talking to the internet. I never did this shit before.
Yeah. Well, see, I
Yeah.
was like out there. I was anti-war. I was doing a lot of organizing, and then when the trans stuff started coming out, and I saw everyone that I knew that I worked with before just go along with it, I was like, fucking weird, man. I'm like, fuck all of you then.
Yep. That's right. You've mentioned that before. That disillusionment. That must have been rough.
Yeah, it was. It really was. Like, I'm like, well, I thought you were my comrades, but I guess I egg on my face, womp womp.
Yeah.
Damn.
For thinking that I was a person. Oh.
Yeah, I thought I actually was like, yeah, on the same level as you. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Red
Oh,
says he thinks Geek Girl's phone may be dead, which is why they switched to TV streaming. Like, that makes sense. So maybe we're not going to get a hey, I'm back. I don't know.
okay. Yeah. It's okay. We found a way to go off. There's always something.
I mean, we could probably do this all day, and it's fun and everything, but you
Yeah,
came
we should
prepared to
probably get going.
do.
I've got things to do too. So if we want to actually
Yeah.
be like we're supposed to, which I think is this is going to be a good one. Because it's going to
Cool.
start to get into the whole population control,
Yay!
particularly at the end. So let me just get my trusty mic set up. So in case anyone doesn't know, I'm going to be plugging in my microphone so that it doesn't sound so awful. And I won't be able to hear you guys. So everyone's gonna like, I don't know if you have any questions or whatever, just write them down and we'll have a discussion a little bit afterwards about what we just read, but not
Mm-hmm.
while we're actually reading. So
And I'm going to be muted while she is reading, so y'all can hear her.
yeah. Is that good?
All right.
Good.
Yeah. So.
All right. So let's start. Hold on. So we've got the accumulation of labor and the degradation of women, part 2. This is the second chapter, and we'll be doing subchapters, or yeah, I guess subchapters, with the price revolution and the pauperization of the European working class, the state intervention in the reproduction of labor, poor relief, and the criminalization of the working class. Then we get to population decline, economic crisis, and the disciplining of women. So then we're going to start with a graph that will come into play if you want to just, there we go. All right, so the price revolution and the pauperization of the European working class. This inflationary phenomenon, which due to its devastating social consequences has been named the price revolution, was attributed by contemporaries and later economists, such as Adam Smith, to the arrival of gold and silver from America, pouring into Europe through Spain in a mammoth stream. But it has been noted that prices had been rising before these metals started circulating through the European markets. Moreover, in themselves, gold and silver are not capital and could have been put to other uses, such as to make jewelry or gold copulas or to embroider clothes. If they functioned as price regulating devices, capable of turning even wheat into a precious commodity, this was because they were planted into a developing capitalist world in which a growing percentage of the population, 1/3 in England, had no access to land and had to buy the food that they had once produced. And because the ruling class had learned to use the magical power of money to cut labor costs. In other words, prices rose because of the development of a national and international market system, encouraging the export-import of agricultural products, and because merchants hoarded goods to sell them later at a higher price. In September 1565, in Antwerp, while the poor were literally starving in the streets, a warehouse collapsed under the weight of the grain packed in it. It was under these circumstances that the arrival of the American treasure triggered a massive redistribution of wealth and a new proletarianization process. Rising prices ruined the small farmers, who had to give up their land to buy grain or bread when the harvests could not feed their families, and created a class of capitalist entrepreneurs who accumulated fortunes by investing in agriculture and money lending at a time when having money was for many people a matter of life and death. The price revolution also triggered a historic collapse in the real wage comparable to that which occurred in our time throughout Asia and Latin America, in the countries structurally adjusted by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. By 1600, real wages in Spain had lost 30% of their purchasing power with respect to what they had been in 1511. And the collapse was just as sharp in other countries. While the price of food went up 8 times, wages increased only by 3 times. This was not the work of the invisible hand of the market, but the product of a state policy that prevented laborers from organizing, while giving merchants the maximum freedom with regard to the pricing and movement of goods. Predictably, within a few decades, the real wage lost 2/3 of its purchasing power, as shown by the changes that intervened in the daily wages of an English carpenter, expressed in kilograms of grain between the 14th and 18th century. So there is a little bit of a little diagram that I had it printed out that's showcasing this, but trust me, it's true. It took centuries for wages in Europe to return to the level they had reached in the late Middle Ages. Things deteriorated to the point that, in England by 1550, male artisans had to work 40 weeks to earn the same income that, at the beginning of the century, they had been able to obtain in 15 weeks. In France, which you can see on the graph, wages dropped by 60% between 1470 and 1570. The wage collapse was especially disastrous for women. In the 14th century, they had received half the pay of a man for the same task. But by the mid-16th century, they were receiving only 1/3 of the reduced male wage and could no longer support themselves by wage work, either in agriculture or in manufacturing, a fact undoubtedly responsible for the massive spread of prostitution in this period. What followed was the absolute impoverishment of the European working class, a phenomenon so widespread and general that by 1550 and long after, workers in Europe were referred to as simply the poor. Evidence for this dramatic impoverishment is the change that occurred in the workers' diets. Meat disappeared from their tables except for a few scraps of lard, and so did beer and wine, salt and olive oil. From the 16th to the 18th centuries, the workers' diets consisted essentially of bread, the main expense in their budget. This was a historic setback, whatever we may think of dietary norms compared to the abundance of meat that had typified the late Middle Ages. Peter Credite writes that at a time that, quote, annual meat consumption had reached the figure of 100 kilos per person, an incredible quantity even by today's standards. Up to the 19th century, this figure declined to less than 20 kilos, end quote. Brunel, too, speaks of the end of the carnivorous Europe, summoning as a witness the Swabian Heinrich Müller, who in 1550 commented that, quote, "In the past, they ate differently at the peasant's house. Then there was meat and food in profusion every day. Tables at village fairs and feasts sank under their load. Today, everything has truly changed. For some years, in fact, what a calamitous time, what high prices. And the food of the most comfortably off peasants is almost as worse than that of day laborers and valets previously," unquote. Not only did meat disappear, but food shortages became common, aggravated in times of harvest failure when the scanty grain reserves sent the price of grain sky high, condemning city dwellers to starvation. This is what occurred in the famine years of the 1540s and 1550s, and again in the decades of the 1580s and 1590s, which were some of the worst in the history of the European proletariat, coinciding with widespread unrest and a record number of witch trials. But malnutrition was rampant also in normal times, so that food acquired a high symbolic value as a marker of rank. The desire for it among the poor reached epic proportions, inspiring dreams of Pantagruelian orgies, like those described by Rabelais and in his Gargantua and Pantagruel in circa 1552, and causing nightmarish obsessions such as the conviction and spread among northeastern Italian farmers that witches roamed the countryside at night to feed upon their cattle. Indeed, the Europe that was preparing to become a Promethean world mover, presumably taking humankind to new technological and cultural heights, was a place where people never had enough to eat. Food became an object of such intense desire that it was believed that the poor sold their souls to the devil to get their hands on it. Europe was also a place where, in times of bad harvests, country folk fed upon acorns, wild roots, or the barks of trees, and multitudes roved the countryside weeping and wailing, so hungry that they would devour the beans in the fields. Or they invaded the cities to benefit from grain distributions or to attack the houses and granaries of the rich, who, in turn, rushed to get arms and shut the city gates to keep the starving out. That the transition to capitalism inaugurated a long period of starvation for workers in Europe, which plausibly ended because of the economic expansion produced by colonization, is also demonstrated by the fact that while in the 14th and 15th centuries the proletarian struggle had centered around the demand for liberty and less work, by the 16th and 17th centuries it was mostly spurred on by hunger, taking the form of assaults on bakeries and granaries, and of riots against the export of local crops. The authorities described those who participated in these attacks as good-for-nothing or poor and humble people, but most were craftsmen living by this time from hand to mouth. It was the women who usually initiated and led the food revolts. 6 of the 31 food riots in the 17th century France, studied by Yves-Marie Boucher, were made up exclusively of women. In the others, the female presence was so conspicuous that Boucher calls them women's riots. Commenting on this phenomenon with reference to 18th century England, Sheila Rowbotham concluded that women were prominent in this type of protest because of their role as their families' caretakers. But women were also those most ruined by high prices. For having less access to money and employment than men, they were more dependent on cheap food for survival. This is why, despite their subordinate status, they took quickly to the streets when food prices went up, or when rumors spread that the grain supplies were being removed from town. This is what happened at the time of the Cordoba uprising of 1652, which started early in the morning when a poor woman went weeping through the streets of the poor quarter, holding the body of her son who had died of hunger. The same occurred in Montpellier in 1645 when women took to the streets to protect their children from starvation. In France, women besieged the bakeries when they became convinced that grain was to be embezzled or found out that the rich had bought the best bread and the remaining was lighter or more expensive. Crowds of poor women would then gather at the bakers' stalls, demanding bread and charging the bakers with hiding their supplies. Riots broke out also in the squares where grain markets were held, or along the routes taken by the carts with the corn to be exported, and at the river banks where boatmen could be seen loading the sacks. On these occasions, The riders ambushed the carts with pitchforks and sticks, the men carrying away the sacks, the women gathering as much grain as they could in their skirts. The struggle for food was fought also by other means, such as poaching, stealing from one's neighbor's fields or homes, and assaults on the houses of the rich. In Troyes in 1523, rumor added that the poor had put the houses of the rich on fire, preparing to invade them. At Milanese in the Low Countries, the houses of speculators were marked by angry peasants with blood. Not surprisingly, food crimes loom large in the disciplinary procedures of the 16th and 17th centuries. Exemplary is the reoccurrence of the theme of the diabolical banquet in the witch trials, suggesting that feasting on roasted mutton, white bread, and wine was now considered a diabolical act in the case of the common people, because, how dare they have, food. But the main weapons available to the poor in their struggle for survival were their own famished bodies, as in times of famine, hordes of vagabonds and beggars surrounded the better off, half dead of hunger and disease, grabbing their arms and exposing their wounds to them and forcing them to live in a state of constant fear at the prospect of both contamination and revolt. A Venetian man wrote in the mid-16th century, quote, "You cannot walk down a street or stop in a square without multitudes surrounding you to beg for charity. You see hunger written on their faces, their eyes like gemless rings, the wretchedness of their bodies with skins shaped only by bones," end quote. A century later, in Florence, the scene was about the same. One G. Balducci complained in April 1650, quote, "It was impossible to hear Mass. So much was one importuned during the service by wretched people naked and covered with sores," end quote. So then subsection 2, the state intervention in the reproduction of labor, poor relief, and the criminalization of the working class. The struggle for food was not the only front in the battle against the spread of capitalist relations. Everywhere, masses of people resisted the destruction of their former ways of existence, fighting against land privatization, the abolition of customary rights, the imposition of new taxes, wage dependence, and the continuous presence of armies in their neighborhoods, which was so hated that people rushed to close the gates of their towns to prevent soldiers from settling among them. In France, 1,000 uprisings occurred between the 1530s and 1670s, many involving entire provinces and requiring the intervention of troops. England, Italy, and Spain present a similar picture, indicating that the pre-capitalist world of the village, which Marx dismissed under the rubric of rural idiocy, could produce as high a level of struggle as any of the industrial proletariat has waged. In the Middle Ages, migration, vagabondage, and the rise of crimes against property were part of the resistance to impoverishment and dispossession. These phenomena now took on massive proportions. Everywhere, if we give credit to the complaints of the contemporary authorities, vagabonds were swarming, changing cities, crossing borders, sleeping in the haystacks, or crowding at the gates of towns. A vast humanity involved in a diaspora of its own that for decades escaped the authorities' control. 6,000 vagabonds were reported in Venice alone in 1545. In Spain, vagrants cluttered the roads, stopping at every town. Starting with England, always a pioneer in these matters, the state passed new, far harsher anti-vagabond laws, prescribing enslavement and capital punishment in cases of recidivism. But repression was not effective, and the roads of 16th and 17th century Europe remained places of great commotion and encounters. Through them passed heretics escaping persecution, discharged soldiers, journeymen, and other humble folk in search of employment, and then foreign artisans, evicted peasants, prostitutes, hucksters, petty thieves, professional beggars. Above all, through the roads of Europe passed the tales, stories, and experiences of a developing proletariat. Meanwhile, the crime rates also escalated in such proportions that we can assume that a massive reclamation and reappropriation of the stolen the stolen communal wealth was underway. Today, these aspects of the transition to capitalism may seem, for Europe at least, things of the past, or, as Marx put it in the Granderie circa 1973, quote, historical preconditions of capitalist development, unquote, to be overcome by more mature forms of capitalism. But the essential similarity between these phenomena and the social consequences of the new phase of globalization that we are witnessing tells us otherwise. Pauperization, rebellion, and the escalation of crime are structural elements of capitalist accumulation, as capitalism must strip the workforce from its means of reproduction to impose its own rule. That in the industrializing regions of Europe, by the 19th century, the most extreme forms of proletarian misery and rebellion had disappeared is not a proof against this claim. Proletarian misery and rebellions did not come to an end. They only lessened to the degree that the super exploitation of workers had been exported through the institutionalization of slavery at first, and later through the continuing expansion of colonial domination. As for the transitional period, this remained in Europe a time of intense social conflict, providing the stage for the set of state initiatives that, judging from their effects, had three main objectives. 1, to create a more disciplined workforce. 2, to diffuse social protest. And 3, to fix workers to the jobs forced upon them. Let us look at them in turn. In pursuit of social discipline, an attack was launched against all forms of collective sociality and sexuality, including sports, games, dance, ale-wakes, festivals, and other group rituals that had been a source of bonding and solidarity among workers. It was sanctioned by a deluge of bills, 25 in England, just for the regulation of alehouses in the years between 1601 and 1606. Peter Burke, in his work on the subject, has spoken of it as a campaign against popular culture. But we can see that what was at stake was the desocialization or decollectivization of the reproduction of the workforce, as well as the attempt to impose a more productive use of leisure time. This process in England reached its climax with the coming to power of the Puritans in the aftermath of the Civil War of 1642 to 49. And when the fear of social indiscipline prompted the banning of all proletarian gatherings and merrymaking. But the moral reformation was equally intense in non-Protestant areas where, in the same period, religious processions were replacing the dancing and singing that had been held in and out of the churches. Even the individual's relationship with God was privatized. In Protestant areas, with the institution of a direct relationship between the individual and the divinity. In the Catholic areas, with the introduction of individual confession. The church itself, as a community center, ceased to host any social activity other than those addressed to the cult. As a result, the physical enclosure operated by land privatization and the hedging of the commons was amplified by a process of social enclosure. The reproduction of workers, shifting from the open field to the home, from the community to the family, from the public space, the commons and the church, to the private. Secondly, in the decades between 1530 and 1560, a system of public assistance was introduced in at least 60 European towns, both by initiative of the local municipalities and by direct intervention of the central state. Its precise goals were still debated. While much of the literature on this topic sees the introduction of public assistance as a response to a humanitarian crisis that jeopardized social control, in his massive study of coerced labor, the French Marxist scholar Yann Molière-Boutin insists that its primary objective was, quote, the great fixation of the proletariat, end quote. That is, the attempt to prevent the flight of labor. In any event, the introduction of public assistance was a turning point in the state relation between workers and capital and the definition of the function of the state. It was the first recognition of the unsustainability of a capitalist system ruling exclusively by means of hunger and terror. It was also the first step in the reconstruction of the state as the guarantor of the class relation and as the chief supervisor of the reproduction and disciplining of the workforce. Antecedents for this function can be found in the 14th century, when faced with the generalization of the anti-feudal struggle. The state had emerged as the only agency capable of confronting a working class that was regionally unified, armed, and no longer confined in its demands to the political economy of the manor. In 1351, with the passing of the Statute of Laborers in England, which fixed the maximum wage, the state had formally taken charge of the regulation and repression of labor, which the local lords were no longer capable of guaranteeing. But it was with the introduction of public assistance that the state began to claim ownership of the workforce, and a capitalist division of labor was instituted within the ruling class, enabling employers to relinquish any responsibility for the reproduction of workers in the certainty that the state would intervene, either with the carrot or with the stick, to address the inevitable crisis. With this innovation, a leap occurred also in the management of social reproduction, resulting in the introduction of demographic record-taking or consent or census-taking, the recording of mortality, natality, marriage rates, and the application of accounting to social relations. Exemplary is the work of the administrators of the Bureau de Pauvreté in Lyon, France, who by the end of the 16th century had learned to calculate the number of the poor, assess the amount of food needed by each child or adult, and keep track of the deceased to make sure that nobody could claim assistance in the name of a dead person. Along with this new social science, an international debate also developed on the administration of public assistance, anticipating the contemporary debate on welfare. Should only those unable to work, described as the deserving poor, be supported, or should able-bodied laborers unable to find a job also be given help? And how much or how little should they be given so as not to be discouraged from looking for work? These questions were crucial from the viewpoint of social discipline, as a key objective of public aid was to tie workers to their jobs. But on these matters, a consensus could rarely be reached. While humanist reformers like Jean-Louis Vive and spokesmen for the wealthy recognized the economic and disciplinary benefits of a more liberal and centralized dispensation of charity, not exceeding the distribution of bread, however. Part of the clergy strenuously opposed the ban on individual donations, but across differences of systems and opinions, assistance was administered with such stinginess that it generated as much conflict as appeasement. Those assisted resented the humiliating rituals imposed on them, like wearing the mark of infamy, which was previously reserved for lepers and Jews, or in France, participating in the annual processions of the poor, in which they had to parade, singing hymns and holding candles, and they vehemently protested when the alms were not promptly given or were inadequate to their needs. In response, in some French towns, gibbets were erected at a time of food distributions or when the poor were asked to work in exchange for the food they received. In England, as the 16th century progressed, receipt of public aid, also for children and for the elderly, was made conditional on the incarceration of the recipients in workhouses, where they became the experimental subjects for a variety of work schemes. Consequently, the attack on workers that had begun with enclosures and the price revolution in the space of a century led to the criminalization of the working class. That is, the formation of a vast proletariat either incarcerated in the newly constructed workhouses and correctional houses, or seeking its survival outside the law and living in open antagonism to the state, always one step away from the whip and the noose. From the viewpoint of the formation of a laborious workforce, this was a decisive failure, and the constant preoccupation with the question of social discipline in 16th and 17th century political circles indicates that the contemporary statesmen and entrepreneurs were keenly aware of it. Moreover, the social crisis that this general state of rebelliousness provoked was aggravated in the second half of the 16th century by a new economic contraction, in great part caused by the dramatic population decline that occurred in Spanish America after the conquest and the shrinking of the colonial economies. So next section, we have population decline, economic crisis, and the disciplining of women. Within less than a century from the landing of Columbus on the American continent, the colonizers' dream of an infinite supply of labor, echoing the explorers' estimate of an infinite number of trees in the forest of the Americas, was dashed. Europeans had brought death to America. Estimates of the population collapse which affected the region in the wake of the colonial invasion vary, but scholars almost unanimously liken its effect to an American Holocaust. According to David Stannard, circa 1992, in the century after the conquest, the population declined by 75 million across South America, representing 95% of its inhabitants. This is also the estimate of André Gondier-Frank, who writes that, quote, within little more than a century, the Indian population declined by 90% and even 95% in Mexico, Peru, and some other regions, end quote. In Mexico, the population fell from 11 million in 1519 to 6.5 million in 1565 to about 2.5 million in 1600. By 1580, disease assisted by brutality had killed off or driven away most of the people of the Antilles and the lowlands of New Spain, Peru, and the Caribbean. And it would soon wipe out many more in Brazil. The clergy rationalized this Holocaust as God's punishment for the Indians' bestial behavior, but its economic consequences were not ignored. In addition, by the 1580s, population decline also in Western Europe, and continued to do so in the 17th century, reaching a peak in Germany where 1/3 of its population was lost. With the exception of the Black Death from 1345 to 1348, this was a population crisis without precedents, and statistics, as awful as they are, tell only a part of the story. Death struck at the poor. It was not the rich, for the most part, who perished when the plague or the smallpox swept the towns, but craftsmen, day laborers, and vagabonds. They died in such numbers that their bodies paved the streets, and the authorities denounced the existence of a conspiracy, instigating the population to hunt for the malefactors. But the population decline was also blamed on low natality rates and the reluctance of the poor to reproduce themselves. To what extent this charge was justified is difficult to tell, since demographic recording before the 17th century was rather uneven. But we know that by the end of the 16th century, the age of marriage was increasing in all social classes, and that in the same period, the number of abandoned children, a new phenomenon, started to grow. We also have the complaints of ministers who, from the pulpit, charged that the youth did not marry and procreate in order not to bring more mouths into the world than they could feed. The peak of the demographic and economic crisis were the decades of the 1620s and 1630s. In Europe, as in the colonies, markets shrank, trade stopped, unemployment became widespread, and for a while there was a possibility that the developing capitalist economy might crash. For the integration between the colonial and the European economies had reached a point where the reciprocal impact of the crisis rapidly accelerated its course. This was the first international economic crisis. It was a general crisis, as historians have called it. It is in this context that the question of the relation between labor, population, and the accumulation of wealth came to the foreground of political debate and strategy to produce the first elements of a population policy and a so-called biopower regime. The crudeness of the concept supplied, often confusing populousness with population, and the brutality of the means by which the state began to punish any behavior obstructing population growth, should not deceive us in this respect. It is my contention that it was the population crisis of the 16th and 17th centuries, not the end of famine in Europe in the 18th century, as Foucault had argued, that turned reproduction and population growth into state matters, as well as primary objects of intellectual discourse. I further argue that the intensification of the persecution of witches and the new disciplinary methods that the state adopted in this period to regulate procreation and break women's control over reproduction are also to be traced to this crisis. The evidence for this argument is circumstantial, and it should be recognized that other factors contributed to increase the determination of the European power structure to control more strictly women's reproductive function. Among them, we must include the increasing privatization of property and economic relations that, within the bourgeoisie, generated a new anxiety concerning the question of paternity and the conduct of women. Similarly, in the charge that witches sacrifice children to the devil, a key theme in the Great Witch Hunt of the 16th and 17th centuries, we can read not only a preoccupation with population decline, but also the fear of the purported classes with regard to their subordinates, particularly low-class women who, as servants, beggars, or healers, had many opportunities to enter their employers' houses and cause them harm. It cannot be pure coincidence, however, that at the very moment when population was declining and an ideology was forming that stressed the centrality of labor in economic life, severe penalties were introduced in the legal codes of Europe to punish women guilty of reproductive crimes. The concomitant, I can't even say that word, the concomitant, there we go, development of a population crisis, an expansionist population theory, and the introduction of policies promoting population growth is well documented. By the mid-16th century, the idea that the number of citizens determines a nation's wealth had become something of a social axiom. A French political thinker and demonologist, Jean Bodin, wrote, quote, "In my view, one should never be afraid of having too many subjects or too many citizens, for the strength of the Commonwealth consists in men," end quote. The Italian economist Giovanni Battiro had a more sophisticated approach, recognizing the need for a balance between the number of people and the means of subsistence. Still, he declared that the, quote, "the greatness of a city did not depend on its physical size or the circuit of its walls, but exclusively on the number of its residents," end quote. Henry IV, saying that, quote, "the strength and wealth of a king lie in the number and opulence of its citizens," end quote, sums up the demographic thought of the age. Concern with population growth is detectable also in the program of the Protestant Reformation. Dismissing the traditional Christian exaltation of chastity, the reformers valorized marriage, sexuality, and even women because of their reproductive capacity. Woman is, quote, "needed to bring about the increase of the human race. Whatever their weaknesses, women possess one virtue that cancels them all. They have a womb and that they can give birth," end quote. Support for population growth climaxed with the rise of mercantilism, which made the presence of a large population the key to the prosperity and power of a nation. Mercantilism has often been dismissed by mainstream economists as a crude system of thought because of its assumption that the wealth of nations is proportional to the quantity of laborers and money available to them. The brutal means which the mercantilists applied in order to force people to work in their hunger for labor have contributed to their disrepute, as most economists wish to maintain the illusion that capitalism fosters freedom rather than coercion. It was a mercantilist class that invented the workhouses, hunted down vagabonds, transported criminals to the American colonies, and invested in the slave trade, all the while asserting the utility of poverty and declaring idleness a social plague. Thus, it has not been recognized that in the mercantilist theory and practice we find the most direct expression of the requirements of primitive accumulation, and the first capitalist policy explicitly addressing the problem of the reproduction of the workforce. This policy, as we have seen, had an intensive side consisting in the imposition of a totalitarian regime using every means to extract the maximum of work from every individual, regardless of age and condition. But it also had an extensive one consisting in the effort to expand the size of population, and thereby the size of the army and the workforce. As Elie Heckscher noted, quote, "an almost fanatical desire to increase population prevailed in all countries during the period when mercantilism was at its height, in the later part of the 17th century. Along with, end quote, along with it, a new concept of human beings also took hold, picturing them as just raw materials, workers, and breeders for the state. But even prior to the heyday of mercantile theory, in France and England, the state adopted of pro-natalist measures that, combined with public relief formed the embryo of a capitalist reproductive policy. Laws were passed that put a premium on marriage and penalized celibacy, modeled on those adopted by the late Roman Empire for this purpose. The family was given a new importance as the key institution providing for the transmission of property and for the reproduction of the workforce. Simultaneously, we had the beginning of a demographic recording and the intervention of the state in the supervision of sexuality, procreation, and family life. But the main initiative that the state took to restore the desired population ratio was the launching of a true war against women, clearly aimed at breaking the control that they had exercised over their bodies and reproduction. As we will see later in this volume, this war was waged primarily through the witch hunt that literally demonized any form of birth control and non-procreative sexuality, while charging women with sacrificing children to the devil. But it also relied on the redefinition of what constitutes a reproductive crime. Thus, starting in the mid-16th century, while Portuguese ships were returning from Africa with their first human cargoes, all the European governments began to impose the severest penalties against contraception, abortion, and infanticide. This last practice had been treated with some leniency in the Middle Ages, at least in the case of poor women, but now it was turned into a capital crime and punished more harshly than the majority of male crimes. To quote, in 16th century Nuremberg, the penalty for maternal infanticide was drowning. In 1580, the year in which the severed heads of 3 women convicted of maternal infanticide were nailed to the scaffold for public contemplation, the penalty was charged to beheading. End quote. New forms of surveillance were also adopted to ensure that pregnant women did not terminate their pregnancies. In France, a royal edict of 1556 required women to register every pregnancy and sentence to death those whose infants died before baptism after a concealed delivery, whether or not proven guilty of any wrongdoing. Similar statutes were passed in England and Scotland in 1624 and 1690. A system of spies was also created to surveil the unwed mothers and deprive them of any support. Even hosting an unmarried pregnant woman was made illegal for fear that she might escape the public scrutiny, while those who befriended her were exposed to public criticism. As a consequence, women began to be prosecuted in large numbers, and more were executed for infanticide in 16th and 17th century Europe than more than any other crime, except for witchcraft, a charge that also centered on the killing of children and other violations of reproductive norms. Significantly, in the case of both infanticide and witchcraft, the statutes limiting women's legal responsibility were lifted. Thus, women walked for the first time into the courtrooms of Europe in their own name as legal adults under charge of being witches and child murderers. Also, the suspicion under which midwives came in this period, leading to the entrance of the male doctor into the delivery room, stemmed more from the authorities' fears of infanticide than from any concern with the midwife's alleged medical incompetence. With the marginalization of the midwife, the process began by which women lost the control they had exercised over procreation and were reduced to a passive role in child delivery, while male doctors came to be seen as the true givers of life, as in the alchemic dreams of the Renaissance magicians. With this shift, a new medical practice also prevailed, one that, in the case of medical emergency, prioritized the life of the fetus over that of the mother. This was in contrast to the customary birthing process, which women had controlled, and indeed, for it to happen, the community of women that had gathered around the bed of the future mother had to be first expelled from the delivery room. And midwives had to be placed under the surveillance of the doctor, or had to be recruited to police women. In France and Germany, midwives had to become spies for the state if they wanted to continue their practice. They were expected to report all new births, discover the fathers of children born out of wedlock, and examine the women suspected of having secretly given birth. They also had to examine suspected local women for any sign of lactation when fondlings were discovered on the church's step. The same type of collaboration was demanded of relatives and neighbors. In Protestant countries and towns, neighbors were supposed to spy on women and report all relevant sexual details. If a woman received a man when her husband was away, or if she entered a house with a man and shut the door behind her. In Germany, the pro-natalist crusade reached such a point that women were punished if they did not make enough of an effort during child delivery or showed little enthusiasm for their offspring. The outcome of these policies that lasted for 2 centuries, women were still being executed in Europe for infanticide at the end of the 18th century, was the enslavement of women to procreation. While in the Middle Ages, women had been able to use various forms of contraceptives and had exercised an undisputed control over the birthing process, from now on their wombs became public territory, controlled by men and the state, and procreation was directly placed at the service of capitalist accumulation. And in this sense, the destiny of Western European women in the period of primitive accumulation was similar to that of the female slaves in the American colonial plantations who, especially after the end of the slave trade in 1807, were forced by their masters to become breeders of new workers. The comparison has obviously serious limits. European women were not openly delivered to sexual assaults, though proletarian women could be raped with impunity and punished for it, nor had they to suffer the agony of seeing their children taken away and sold on the auction block. The economic profit derived from the births imposed upon them was also far more concealed. In this sense, it is the condition of the enslaved women that most explicitly reveals the truth and the logic of capitalist accumulation behind it. But despite the differences, in both cases, the female body was turned into an instrument for the reproduction of labor and the expansion of the workforce, treated as a natural breeding machine functioning according to rhythms outside the woman's control. This aspect of primitive accumulation is absent in Marx's analysis. Except for his remarks in the Communist Manifesto on the use of women within the bourgeois family as producers of heirs guaranteeing the transmission of family property, Marx never acknowledged that procreation could become a terrain of exploitation, and by the same token, a terrain of resistance. He never imagined that women could refuse to reproduce, or that such a refusal could become part of the class struggle. In the Granderie, he argued that capitalist development proceeds irrespective of population numbers because by virtue of the increasing productivity of labor, the labor that capital exploits constantly diminishes in relation to constant capital. That is to say that capital invested in machinery and other production assets with the consequent determination of a surplus population. But this dynamic, which Marx defines as the law of population typical of the capitalist mode of production in his Des Capitales, Volume 1, could only prevail if procreation were a purely biological process or an activity responding automatically to economic change, and if capital and the state did not need to worry about women going on strike against child making. This, in fact, is what Marx assumed. He acknowledged that capitalist development had been accompanied by an increase in population, of which he occasionally discussed the causes, but like Adam Smith, he saw this increase as a natural effect of economic development, and in Des Capitales, Volume 1, he repeatedly contrasted the determination of a surplus population with the population's natural increase. Why procreation should be a fact of nature rather than a social, historically determined activity invested by diverse interests and power relations is a question Marx did not ask. Nor did he imagine that men and women might have different interests with respect to childmaking, an activity which he treated as a gender-neutral, undifferentiated processes. In reality, so far are procreation and population changes from being automatic or natural that in all phases of capitalist development, the state has had to resort to regulation and coercion to expand or reduce the workforce. This was especially true at the time of the capitalist takeoff, when the muscles and bones of workers were the primary means of production. But even later, down to the present, the state has spared no efforts in its attempt to wrench from women's hands the control of over reproduction, and to determine which children should be born, where, when, or in what numbers. Consequently, women have often been forced to procreate against their will and have experienced an alienation from their bodies, their labor, and even their children, deeper than that experienced by any other workers. No one can describe, in fact, the anguish and desperation suffered by women seeing her body turn against herself, as it must occur in the case of an unwanted pregnancy. This is particularly true in those situations in which out-of-wedlock pregnancies are penalized, and when having a child makes a woman vulnerable to social ostracism or even death. And end chapter, or subchapter.
Wow, what a place to leave off at.
I know, when it's starting to get real good.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Choosing life could make you die. Oh my god.
Mm.
Not that they left
Like I
them
said,
much
it's going to
choice.
start getting into the whole women thing with the next chapters, right? You can see it kind of build up now.
Oh yeah.
So it's it's getting there. I know, I'm just like, it's been so while since I've read this, right? So I was like, oh, because I know it's coming, but I don't know exactly when it comes. And it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, we all know what's coming. Oh
But
my
that's why
goodness.
I think also it's important to understand the history behind it too, because you could see the all the different factors that play into it. You need to understand the economics and all that, and like how it historically actually was, and how it sort of just accumulated to this process of the witch burnings of the state. Yeah. So.
No, it really is like we've all just kind of heard the end of the story.
Mm-hmm. So that was a downer at the end.
I don't know. On the one hand, I as like the persecution of single mothers continues to this day.
Oh, I know,
So
it does. It totally does. Like, yeah. But have you noticed the sort of similarities between the population decline now, too, as well? Everyone's talking about, nations are the population's declining. Who cares?
Right. That's the big mystery as to why that's a big deal. And am I an idiot? Because I still don't feel like that was adequately explained, especially like when you have the technology that you don't need, as she said, like the backs and bones of the workers or whatever it is, like literally to do everything.
What do you mean?
Okay. Like when they were first getting the capitalism thing going, they needed all hands on deck, right? And as many as possible, right?
Well, the population was declining. People also were getting sick because of the plague. And then you have people getting sick because they brought disease. So many people were dying. So what they needed to do was, and because all the poor, part of that was because women had contraception, birth control. So that was part of the decline, was that they had control because they were too poor. They didn't want another kid. And so it was starting with the policing of women on that way to try to make sure that they don't. And also the property, right? So for bourgeois women or whatever, right? When they're transmitting it the property to the son or the next of kin, they want to make sure that like they know who the father is, right? They want it in wedlock, kind of like how the conservatives nowadays, or like or ever since their election, want to have it private ownership of a woman,
right?
To be a birthing machine.
I guess what I'm saying is
together of trying to increase the population, but make sure that men have the power in the private of reproduction.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, okay, maybe what I'm saying is, excuse me. Like, was it just a bad confluence of events? I'm just hear me out for a second. Like, okay, they need this extra population to get this economic shift going, and they don't have it, right? Because there's been plagues, there's been just terrible policies apparently, so everybody's
trying to
starved.
expand into the Americas. That's another part.
Right. So they're trying to do all that, so they need all these extra people, so they panic, right?
Yeah.
But comparing that to now, what are they trying to shift to that they need? Like we supposedly have the technology to do the thing, so they don't need all the extra people. So like, why do they care?
Why do they care now?
Yeah.
I think they care now. Well, okay, so we're part of a class in the division of labor. When you look at it as a whole, they want certain amounts of people gone, but there's certain classes to sort of have their, like, to keep going, because they're going to be the ones that could like are doing the mechanics of the technology. So not everyone. They don't care if poor people die, but if you're middle class and up, because that's where that talk is coming from, for people that actually have a little bit like extra, like that are not completely working poor. That's who that's supposed, that's that target, is to have them be like, have their women under control as their own breeding machines. They're not going to be using technology like for the birthing. They're gonna, because that's the upper class, that's for the elite class to make workers with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's for that, but they still need like to have people be the, you know, handlers of the machines, of the technology. So that message is for them.
Okay. Ugh.
It's the same thing, like say like in there was a couple of years ago in Peru, there was a big scandal because a lot of doctors had trained in America, then went to Peru and started for all the indigenous that were there, who were really against the encroaching of the closure of the commons and the extraction of the resources on their land, poisoning them. What they did, they
Uh-huh.
sterilized them.
Oh
They
yeah.
went in and they had to get sterilized, and because they want to kill them off, right? They don't want that's a part of the population where they want to be, you know, completely wiped out, because it encroaches on their right to markets and to extract the resources.
Yeah.
So they need so they need that portion to die off. And so there's different portions of where the target is a different message.
Fine. Okay. Yeah. It's a lot easier to steal people's shit if they're just not there.
Exactly. That's what race comes from. That's why the race even exists. It's not because it's a natural progression. It's because there needs to be a reason why you need to fucking kill off a bunch of people who look on that land, and they just happen to look different. So you focus on that and make up stories about how they're savages. Because people want to go kill people for no reason except for the, you know, the fact that they're going to take the resources that they don't even get anything out of, right? Because it's for the elites. So they're not going to
Yeah.
like put their lives on the line for that unless you make up stories about who they are as a group.
Right. You have to come up with some amazing story to trick people's conscience into letting them
Yeah,
do that.
exactly. Because people are naturally, we're social creatures of community. We don't naturally want to kill everyone. We're not predatory creatures like that naturally.
Right. Right.
There's a very like a small amount of predatory, like actual predatory creatures, like certain sharks, cougars, like that are by themselves, that like predate by themselves, and like there's very small, most creatures, and this is Darwinism, like this is not something that's just a theory, like that's no basis. It's
Yeah.
where those who last through the evolution process are those that have the more ability to sustain through the environmental changes. And it's shown time and again that those that can evolve because of those changes are those that can work in groups, and we're a creature that does that. So yeah, so it goes
Yeah.
against our nature to do that. So they have to make up these stories.
Yep.
Yep.
Awful.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know. Yes, it is.
I'm just full of thoughtful commentary today, aren't I?
No, but it's good to like parse out in case that's not something that's made clear in the literature.
Oh, I took a bunch of notes. Most of them were for my own benefit, I guess, just trying to understand and like draw everything together. Uh, and like at the moment, we're still on the scale of centuries, right? Because you were talking about, from 1470 to 1570. Da
Yeah.
da da da
So we
da. And I'm like,
started off
okay,
there to kind of get the premise and the basis of
yeah,
before the witch trial starts, which accelerated in the 16th and 17th, and then
right,
in the 18th centuries. And it was a process coalesced and coincided with the expansion to the Americas and how that was handled, because it really has lots of similarities to the witch burnings and how they were able to sort of. We'll get into that. That's really. I'll just leave that for later because yeah, that will come into play and we'll go through that too in here.
Mm.
Oh, Alfalfa's got to go on a jet.
Oh. Okay. Nice seeing you. Have a good one. See you next time. Oh my gosh, it says we're down to 0 people. It's just you and me. Quick, while they're gone.
Well, hopefully people sometimes will come and watch afterwards, even if they're no one here.
Oh yeah, most people do. That's how most of the views get got.
Get got?
Mm-hmm. That's what I said. I'm sticking to it. I'm sorry. I'm just in sort of a goofy mood today, apparently.
That's okay.
It's not especially appropriate for the subject matter, but I loved how the courts were like, we're going to recognize your agency so we can prosecute you.
Right? Yeah, it's like thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's mostly the whole disciplining of women came to a whole front with the whole and the suspicions, right, of needing spies to control the deliveries and like to make sure that they don't help in the birth decline with midwives, right, by helping a midwife helping to to make sure they don't use contraceptives and their own shit, right?
And that counterintuitive shift from prioritizing the person in front of you, who's talking to you and whose life is, already underway, to prioritizing the hypothetical person.
Yeah.
Which, and this struck me while I was pregnant, okay, the first time. Is it like, yes, babies are people, but a fetus is not, right? Like, until it can at least survive outside of your body on its own, then that's not what that is, okay? And you have to prioritize the life of the actual material, the actual person standing in front of you talking to you. Like, why would you not do that?
Yeah, well,
over that of a hypothetical person who is wonderful and amazing and everything that anyone might be because they're a hypothetical person.
It makes no sense unless you are suspicious of the woman doing something to that for that to happen, right? So that's why you have to police it. And if
I know.
It's ridiculous. It's because the state's not thinking in terms of these are people. They're thinking these are workers that need to be forced into labor so that we don't have to work. And then we still fucking get all the fucking bounties as if we were.
See, and this is where I have this question. Like, as far as the means of production, like the means of reproduction are clearly in the hands of certain people. And there's no arguing about who that belongs to, really. Right?
Well, they try.
You can't. But, I know, but materially speaking, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
As for the means of production, I am confused about. I mean, owners are bad and everything, right? And they should be collectivized and whatever. But like, okay, somebody needs to accumulate the level of resources needed to assemble those means of production in the first place.
What do you mean?
So, like, okay. If you're going to produce anything on a larger scale, then you need to assemble the resources with which to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's just, how would you... Because, I don't know. I guess it's like you always talk about seizing the means of production, but like how would you assemble those in a collective manner in the first place, I guess is my question.
If you're working somewhere, the company should involve every worker and boss. Mm-hmm. Everyone should know how to do all parts of the work. Like trades and like guilds and stuff used to have do the whole aspect of a job.
Okay.
In the means of production. Okay. That it should be whoever owns that shouldn't be one person. It should be the whole like it's like collective of the like of a company, right? Instead of having like certain hierarchical workers doing menial tasks at little spots, and then up the
Yeah.
ladder. It
Right.
should be they should all learn how to do the job, the whole job, not decompartmentalize it. And
Okay.
so that
See,
they know how the job is functions, so they all can take part democratically in how that company works and goes forward.
I'm against hierarchy, and I definitely think people should be equally involved. However, I'm going to offer you a counterpoint with a real world example of a place that he used to work where they were operating pretty complex machinery and making some pretty complicated stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then on the other side, there were the people who were in charge of selling that stuff. And it was a completely different department of the same business. And like, I don't know that those two, like, how are you going to teach the machine operator to be a salesman? You know what I'm saying? Like,
You can. Oh, it's totally possible. You used to do it.
okay,
That's the thing. It seems so really, really crazy now because they've literally Fordism with the compartmentalizing into parts, certain parts of the work. But see, if a CEO knows all those aspects, they just don't do it. They can just control it. But if they are able to understand that part of the business, why can't a regular person? They
well,
can. They
there's
just
a
don't.
difference between understanding sales and doing it. I'm using that as an
Well,
example
that's what
also
you do
because I
rotation work.
fucking hate
That's what
it
you do with
so
rotation work.
bad.
But that's how you do rotation work. That's how the hospital here would do the job that I did was
Uh-huh.
a tech, right? The tech. We would do rotations so that because they needed us to know every aspect of the job. So we rotate the work. So at this point, you do this part of it. Then you could do this part of it, right? So that you
Uh-huh.
understand the full job.
You're right. I guess I'm for the part where I was on rotation on the sales desk, we would not make many. Like that's all I'm saying. That would not go great. Okay.
Well,
Like
it's not like, but the thing is, everyone, when they say people have gifts, certain gifts are just naturally given. You have to sort of work for it. You have to learn it. So you technically can if you try, because nothing's just given as like not just naturally happens naturally. You have to like work for it. And maybe that's something that with sales you're just not good at. And maybe you don't have a job like
right.
that. You have to sell like that.
No,
There's some
I've had a
things that
couple
you
and
shouldn't have to sell. That is a job that you don't have to like sell as a product, right? This is only for products.
right. And it was just an example that occurred to me of like, I don't know, that cross training seems like it might be difficult.
Well,
I know
it,
there
it,
are a
it
lot of
probably
places that
seems
do
more
that.
difficult, I think, now because we've been compartmentalized so badly. Like we've been really like reduced to like doing simple tasks. I think that people, if we didn't have like a lot of the distractions of the entertainment, like of screens, of computers, if we didn't have so much distractions, our brain capacity would like sky. Like it really distracts us. It really dumbs you down. It really does. I noticed
It
that more.
also inures you into this way of thinking where it's just not you just don't have the complex thought, like
Exactly. And the way that they teach schools. I mean, we watched the human resources
oh my god.
remember how they compartmentalize school, the teachings? So it's ingrained in us because we are learned from that from birth when we're in our education system. It's been deployed so that we're used to that sort of structure. But that's not a thing that has always been.
Well, right.
It's been so long, and we've like been through generations that we can't even. It's hard for us to like even like imagine that we could be not like could do it a completely different structural way than what we are used to.
Oh, I know. But looking at like old school curricula is hilarious, right? Greek, ballet, fencing, and you're like, damn, I want to learn fencing. That sounds
Yeah,
cool.
right. It used to be like, yeah, it's even getting worse. Like I know just from being a parent and
uh,
how the education system is now is even worse, and the kids are learning like it's gotten really bad. Like it was even very different from when I was going to school.
same, yeah. And they took out cursive for a couple of years. They put it back, but like,
I don't think they even take cursive in mine. And they
yeah,
rely so heavily on computers.
yeah,
Like so heavily. And that is also dangerous because you're not able to like figure things out on your own. You're just getting a machine to do it for you because
right,
you're
right,
learning how to
right.
use the machine. But what if there is no machine? Then you're not going to know how to be thinking. Like you're not going to know how to critically think. You're not going to know how to
Yeah,
be self-sufficient. It makes you dependent. Really does. Really
it
makes you dependent
really.
on the state.
I do love science fiction. Maybe that sounds weird, but like, hey, baby.
No, I love
Um,
science fiction.
no, because I grew up like in this house family culture that was sort of steeped in it. So like, wait, you want me to have a robot do everything for me? I can't imagine how that could go wrong.
I like science fiction when it's apocalyptic, sort of dystopian.
You need to
That's
feed
my
him
jam.
more.
Well, I'm feeding myself right now. He can't have any of my soup.
Well, good. That soup's too good for a dog. Sorry, we have a
No, that's okay.
visitor. Bye, honey. Have a nice lunch. Love you. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I can't remember.
We were talking about the school system and education and
Yeah, something to do with that.
how
About it,
terrible it
like
is.
really making it so that you're dependent on the state to be
Oh
able to even
yeah,
think and
technology,
process.
dependence on technology.
Yeah.
Right, which is
Why?
how
And
they
why they're doing that is
weave it
because they
into
want the
your
people that are in the sort of in classes to know how to work the machines, not how to critically
right,
think how to work the machines. And that's what they're being taught in school now. That's how it's structured.
right. Well,
And
and
if you take
like I
that
was
away, they're not going to be able to critically think, know how to be self-sufficient. They basically are just going to be completely and utterly useless to their own survival. It really like takes away agency from someone.
yeah.
Yeah,
Ah,
scary.
and yeah, I do love being able to look up whatever I want at a moment's notice. That's super
Listen,
cool.
I also think technology is good. I was able to get Caliban the Witch by going online and like printing out
Right,
the
and now we're able to share it across a freaking continent. So,
exactly. Now I'm sharing it with someone like, how far away are you from me?
but
And then you
in
got people like
miles?
one of our viewers, Belle, who like lives off in the UK. Like we'll
Yeah,
be able
yeah.
to communicate that way without it.
Right.
So there's
Yeah,
good
no,
and there's
it's
bad, right?
mhm. Right. And I used to that used to be more of a focus on my channel was, looking at the good things. I used to try and focus on that sometimes, but because as far as it's hard to be a progressive these days, I guess is what I'm saying. You
Well, it's because
know.
the technology that we have that could help humanity doesn't. It's because there's a power dynamic imbalance that are going to use it to our detriment. That's the problem.
Well, here's the thing that's maddening to me. It's because, the vast majority of the power in the technology is in the hands of fucking sociopaths. That's because
Exactly.
sociopaths are the most ruthless people, so they end up with the most shit. And that
Yeah.
is this conundrum that I don't even know how to, like, I just want to beat my head against a brick wall.
Yeah.
Because nice people just don't become billionaires. They just don't.
No, because the way to become a billionaire, you have to be able to fuck over everyone and anyone.
It's to be a ruthless asshole. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's this conundrum. Powerful people are almost, universally assholes, or they were raised by assholes, and
Or they have
they
to become
create
assholes just to be in that position.
well, and they create their little insular asshole culture, and then we all look at them and go, "Wow, look at all those gemstones they're wearing. They sure do look cool." And we all try
Yeah.
to be assholes too, so that we can succeed in this system built by assholes. And I just hate it so much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what to do? What to do? And the thing about the assholes is it's a genetic thing. You're never going to get rid of them, right?
Well, I mean, that's
They
my
just
conundrum too. Is like maybe we should all just like, okay. This is gonna sound super black pill, super.
okay, okay, okay.
Sometimes I think, you know what? Maybe we should just die off because us as a species just isn't working. Like because I'm just like,
Aww.
look at what we're doing to everyone, to ourselves, and to like every sentient being, every life thing,
I have a
like on
counterpoint
Earth.
to that. I have a counterpoint to that. Hang on, let me get this thing over here. You've got to see this dog. Look at him.
What?
Can I turn this around now? Ooh,
Look at the dog, the puppy.
just taking a nap on our porch.
Did I see
Doesn't
kitty?
he look? Doesn't he? That's another dog. Believe it or not,
Oh,
that's a
is it a
Chihuahua
dog?
dog. Yeah, that's a Chihuahua dog who desperately wants to come out and play, and she's not going to get to.
Aw,
But yeah, he looks miserable, doesn't he?
totally. But this is what I mean. Like even what we do to
I
animals,
know.
like we see
I
them so
know.
beneath us
Oh, I
that like
know. Oh, I
look at
know.
like the food industry. Like, and I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian. I think that we are literally biologically made to have be both. But like,
I'm
look
so
at the way
glad to
that
hear somebody else say that.
we make meat and our industrialization of like slaughterhouses for that, with like
Right, right.
no fucking consideration to its life, that it's life
Yeah,
that they feel
yeah.
pain.
That's so yeah, that's where it's yeah.
And then you have to remember that that's how rich elites think of us in the
I
same
know.
category. So like
Breed stock.
it's really
You know.
scary.
I
and this
know.
is what I mean. Why I think maybe it would be better for the whole planet and every other life form on Earth if someone else got a chance to be the dominant species rather than the homogeneous one, because we have not earned it whatsoever. We have no respect for anything. We just like damage everything, eat it up and spit it out. But then I know it's hard.
Well, okay. I have been trying to find optimism lately just because I have to, I guess. And like, there are people and organizations out there trying to make things better. I
No,
mean,
I
there
know, but
are.
that's the thing. That's the conundrum part. It's like sometimes I think it'd just be better that way. We haven't earned our place, but I know that like it's not natural. We're not naturally like evil or
Yeah.
sociopathic. I don't think we are. I think this is a learned behavior, and so
Right.
I feel bad for the generations coming after, before us, who are like been born before us and having to inherit this, right? Because they are innocent. So like, it's not that I think that humans are just innately like evil. I just think it's a learned thing, and I just don't know what to do to like cut the head off of this hydra, right?
Right, right, right. That's what I'm saying. It's like there's so much promise if we could just stop listening to the assholes or something. I don't
Or get
know.
rid of them. Get rid of them somehow and
Right,
just
but see, that's what I'm saying is we'd have to like do genetic engineering in order to wholly eradicate them. It's just a
no, not
variation. It's a
necessarily.
natural.
You put them in the fields. That's what well, I mean, I know this might seem like, well, China, this, China. That's what China did. They took all the rulers and they put them in the fields to work.
Okay, but like no, on an ongoing process, on an ongoing generation after generation basis. Okay, like there's just a certain amount of the population who are not wholly connected to the social contract, if you know what I'm saying.
I know, but comparing that amount to the amount of masses of people worldwide, we dominate. We dominate them.
No, I
We could
know,
probably kill them all off.
but then they would repopulate because it's in the genome. Okay,
I don't
it's
think
part
it's
of
so.
the
I'm
natural
speaking for learned behavior.
variation.
I do not
Oh,
think so, though. That's the thing. I don't think. I don't believe. I
okay.
don't believe it's innate and biological. I think it's a learned behavior. And if it was natural, then why are they always have to propagandize people into believing and into acting and behaving a certain way? If it was
Because
natural, they
most of
wouldn't
us
have to.
aren't like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Kill off the ones that are.
Right, but so I guess I'm trying to be a little more practical because
I know it's
you know
unpractical. It's completely unpractical. I know
it
that.
is, it is, it is. And so practically speaking, I don't know. I think maybe you were closer before, like if somebody, but then you'd have to come up with like some sort of personality test to identify these people. You know what I'm saying, and put them to work, or I don't know.
See, I don't
Because
know.
those
Well, that's the
personality
conundrum I
traits do
have. Is
have.
like I know it's impractical, but that's like what would be necessary. Yet it's unpractical, so I don't know what to do. So what do
Right.
you do? This is why,
I don't
like,
know.
I don't know, meteorite for 2026.
No,
It's looking
I'm
pretty good.
really. I think I guess I'm trying to nurture the parts of the zeitgeist and whatever that are positive and not destructive, because there's still.
Yeah, but then you run the risk of ignoring things that need to be dealt with. I
No,
tend
that's
to
why I
go
have you.
pessimistic side because that way I don't nothing comes blindsides me, right?
Like I say, no, that's why I have you.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay,
my
so
goodness.
the conclusion we come to: cat people.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just joking.
How would you type with claws? It begs the question, does it not?
Right? Are you
You have to
pro?
practice.
Are you like adverse to growing a tail? Like,
No, no, that wouldn't bother me, but I use my fingers for stuff all the time, and so, like,
yeah.
I don't even want long fingernails. Never mind claws. Oh my god.
Oh my god, see. I'm already working on it. See.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen that. They're very nice.
I'm trying. I'm trying to evolve
Yeah.
here.
Well, we're all doing our little part, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess so. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we both understand what we're trying to say. Is that it's so big. It's so big, and it's so hard to try to wrap your head
Mhm.
around. It's so unpredictable in what you need to do. Like, there's nothing like. Yeah, it's just
Oh my
it's a
gosh.
clusterfuck. It's a clusterfuck. We live in a clusterfuck.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's the
such an
problem.
evocative way of putting it. Yeah, our 19-year-old came out yesterday morning and she's like, "So I'm going to the store for toilet paper and rice because the ports are all empty." And we were like, "Jesus, we didn't know it was like that yet." Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're all stocked up on toilet paper and rice, but what do you do? Like, what do you
Yeah.
batten down the fucking hatches? I don't.
Yeah, that's basically what I think. That
What does that
hatches.
even mean?
It means learn to try to be as self-sufficient as you possibly can.
Right, yeah, but there's a severe limit to, like, we don't have chickens. You know what I'm
I
saying?
know, but
Like,
that's why you have to make a community and do it, and like that's the problem, and that's why they really force and put forth very hyper individualism on like
yeah,
for us, because they don't want people to collectivize, because if they do then have a community, then there's more hands on deck for resources. That's Darwinism 101, is that there's
yeah,
more community with more hands on deck, more resources that can be given to people, so that the whole as a whole can survive big environmental changes in their big changes in their environment. That's how they are able to survive into evolution. Same thing we need to do is make community, collectivize, and so that there's more hands on deck for chaos that is probably going to be coming, and learn to be self-sufficient and not rely on the state, because once the state takes away all the necessities of life, then you're been dependent upon them for everything, you're not going to
mhm,
know how to survive.
right. Well, and I think that that's instinctive on a level that's too deep for anybody to really tamper with too much. I mean, yeah, people are
Well, yeah, well,
scared, but
that's one thing, is they're constantly having to try to enforce that. So if they're constantly having to propagize that, it makes sense that we are constantly trying to divorce from that. If we're having to be constantly propagandized by that,
mhm,
means that there is an inertia going on where we're being like sort of naturally like natural, like diversion of that, to go, not to be dependent, if they're trying to
right.
always enforce it. So that's one thing. So that's something. That's one seed, little seed, little sesame seed of hope. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe just pour a little bit of water on it every now and then.
Yeah, seed grows.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I gotta get going because I've got things I gotta get done.
yeah, yeah. Same. I have
Yeah,
laundry waiting on me and all that good stuff. So,
yeah, I gotta go. I gotta do other things. Yeah, I gotta go get errands done. Shit, I hate errands.
oh my God,
Okay.
yeah. Good luck. Be safe.
Yeah, and
Be back in a
thanks to
couple
everyone
weeks.
who's watching, even if it's after the talk.
Yes, absolutely. Hi to all you later tuner inners.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something to that effect. All right. Bye bye.
Bye, honey. I'll talk to you next time.
Yeah. See ya.
Have a good one. All right, and that's me out, everybody. Thank you for coming and hanging with us for this. I mean, we're getting to the meat of it, right? 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today. Watch this space. Oh boy. Come on.